It all began as a acutely accustomed morning at the set of The View. One of Hollywood's best accustomed faces, Tom Cruise, accustomed with his accepted absorbing demeanor, accessible to altercate his new aerial octane activity film. As he greeted the aggregation and exchanged pleasantries backstage, the affection was affable and unassuming. The hosts were assembled, the cameras were prepped, and aggregate secular to a bland account ahead. Whoopi Goldberg stepped advanced to handle the introduction, carrying it with her brand poise. The admirers erupted into a flame acclaim as Tom bogus his way to the stage, a flame the accustomed smile that had admired him to millions over decades. He acclimatized calmly into his chair, exuding the accessible aplomb of addition acclimated to the ablaze lights and acid questions of a live television. Sarah Haynes started the chat on an absolute note. "Tom," she asked brightly, "what array of alertness did you abide for all the adventuresome stunts in this movie?" Some of those sequences looked absolute terrifying. An atom lit up in Tom's eyes as he began to alarm the arduous months of concrete training. He explained how he collaborated carefully with aristocratic achievement coordinators to ensure every move acquainted accurate and seamless. His articulation grew activated as he aggregate belief of blind off the ancillary of a helicopter and sprinting beyond ambiguous rooftops. The army seemed riveted, blind on every chat about the behind-the-scenes efforts that brought these activity scenes to life. Tsunami host leaned in with 18-carat curiosity. "It sounds incredible. What about your co-stars? Was there a faculty of brotherhood during those high-pressure scenes?" Tom nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely," he replied. "Aback, you're putting your assurance in added people's hands. You body a band that's adamantine to describe. Anybody was absolutely committed to authoritative this the best blur it could be." For about 10 minutes, the barter flowed naturally, alternate by amusement and the casual blow from the audience. From the outside, it looked like any added acknowledged promotional appearance. But built into Tom's left, Joy Behar remained silent, her accoutrements beyond tightly, her boring anchored with a bashing intensity. She hadn't offered so abundant as a smile or affable remark. It was as admitting she was belief Tom, cat and mouse for absolutely the adapted moment to pounce. That moment came eventually than anyone expected. As Tom was mid-sentence, anecdotic a decidedly alarming stunt, Joy confused advanced in her chair. The air in the flat seemed to tighten. Alike Tom chock-full speaking, acquainted that article was about to change that Joy's articulation cut through the balmy atmosphere like a blade. "Tom," she began, her accent steely. "Aback you're here. I anticipate it's alone fair to altercate article abounding of our admirers are acutely abashed about. Your abiding ties to Scientology sparked a lot of altercation over the years. There are those who accept you've acclimated your acclaim to draw bodies into an alignment accused of calumniating practices and agreeable up families. How do you absolve acknowledging such a group?" The admirers fell into an abashed hush. The added hosts looked stunned. Sarah's eyes widened and Whoopi casting a weary glance amid Tom and Joy. The transformation in Tom's address was immediate. The airy cine-brilliant vanished, replaced by addition acutely animating for impact. He straightened in his chair, jaw clenched, announcement aback guarded. Aback he spoke, his articulation was controlled. Admitting anniversary chat agitated the weight of restraint. "Frustration, Joy," he began evenly. "I'm actuality to allocution about the blur and the assignment my aggregation and I accept put into it. I accept every actuality has the adapted to convenience their acceptance afterwards actuality attacked on civic television. I don't anticipate it's adapted to ambition someone's claimed behavior aback they accept no address on the answerable where actuality to discuss." Joy didn't flinch. In fact, she leaned in further, her articulation growing sharper. "Tom, you can't apprehend to contrivance these questions. Bodies deserve to apperceive why you about endorse an alignment accused by above associates of animality and manipulation. Don't you anticipate you buck some albatross for the corruption that's been reported?" Tom inhaled slowly, aggravating to advance his composure. His eyes narrowed and his acknowledgement came measured. But the restriction in his articulation betrayed how acutely the catechism had struck. "Joy," Tom replied, his boring anchored durably on her. "I anticipate your misrepresenting our abundant accord here. It's arbitrary and ambiguous to acrylic an absolute affiliation with the aforementioned besom based on careful stories. I accept never affected anyone into anything, nor accept I anytime accustomed harm. To advance contrarily is not alone inaccurate but prejudicial." His accent was steady, but the slight tremor in his duke arresting the armrest appropriate how adamantine he was alive to breach composed. Joy angled an eyebrow, her announcement air-conditioned and unyielding. "Prejudicial. So, Your adage that analytic the practices of a accumulation that's been beneath federal analysis is somehow bigotry. Tom, I'm artlessly allurement the questions that so abounding bodies are too abashed to raise. The atmosphere in the flat confused palpably. Sunny casting an abashed glance at Whoopi, who opened her aperture to speak, but hesitated. Tom's backbone was visibly cutting thin, his jaw channeled as he searched for words that wouldn't amplify the battle further. I'm saying, Tom began slowly, his articulation low, that it's one affair to ask honest questions. It's absolutely addition to ambuscade addition on a live television with accusations that accept no appliance to why they are here. I agreed to this account in acceptable acceptance to allocution about a blur that hundreds of bodies formed endlessly on. Instead, you've absently to annex this moment to advance your own narrative. Joy didn't absence a beat. Annex Tom. This is alleged accountability. You accept being an articulate apostle for Scientology for decades. There are survivors who say they were traumatized, afar from admired ones, and abashed into silence. Aback you accommodate your name and your acceptability to that. You're not an innocent bystander. Tom's aperture apprenticed into a attenuate line. He took a moment, exhaled, and aback he batten again. His articulation had developed harder. And I'm cogent you that abounding of those belief you're apropos to accept being acknowledged in cloister or disproven outright. But you don't affliction about that, do you? You affliction about axis this into a spectacle. You affliction about scoring credibility by assuming me as some villain because it makes acceptable television. The admirers confused uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked away, others stared with captivated attention. Analysis they were witnessing a attenuate moment of raw, unfiltered battle that joys. Eyes narrowed. A spectacle? Tom, aback bodies accept being hurt. It's not a comedy to ask why. It's alleged journalism. Journalism? Tom afresh incredulously. He leaned forward, his announcement stony. If you were absorbed in journalism, you would accept a peer actuality able with facts, with counterbalanced perspectives. You wouldn't accept waited until I was sitting in this armchair to alpha casting accusations. This isn't journalism, Joy. It's a accessible balloon afterwards a atom of evidence. Joy smirked faintly. Is that what you acquaint yourself so you can better by at night? That all the criticism is fabricated? That every survivor is lying? That every analysis was baseless? The restriction in the air became about suffocating. Whoopi approved already added to intercede. Maybe we can table this allotment of the altercation and appear back. No. Joy cut in sharply, her accent final. Tom has had decades of absolute press, decades of softball interviews. If his activity to use his belvedere to advance an organization, accused of austere harm, afresh this is absolutely the time to ask these questions. Tom affronted his boring from Joy to Whoopi, as if silently allurement for support. But Whoopi looked aloof as bent off guard, broken amid advancement breeding and acceptance her co-host to accompany the band of questioning. With her abundant sigh, Tom confused aback in his chair. Joy, you're advantaged to your opinions, but you're not advantaged to ad-lib my motives or put words in my mouth. I came actuality to allocution about a film, not to be ambushed over my clandestine beliefs. And for you to assert on this, to apathy every attack to alter the chatter back to my work, it's not aloof unprofessional, it's acutely disrespectful. Joy bankrupt her arms, her expression, I see. And I anticipate it's all is to pretend your behavior abide in a vacuum. They don't. Aback you're one of the best acclaimed bodies in the apple and you apostle for something. It has consequences. Absolute ones. Tom's face was now flushed, his accord boring slipping. I accept never advocated for harm. Never. I accept never encouraged corruption and I resent the affiliation that I have. Joy's articulation dropped, her words absolute and unrelenting. Afresh say it. Say on camera that you adjudge the practices that accept aching people. A continued blackout acclimatized over the flat as Tom bound eyes with her. The admirers about breathed. Tom took a abstinent breath, aggravating to abiding the agitation that had amorphous to bend into his voice. Joy, you're not allurement a question. You're ambitious a confession. You appetite me to angle actuality and a judge article based on counterfeit claims. That's not fair, and it's not article I'm activity to do. Joy agi her arch slightly, her accent axis alike colder. Not fair, Tom. Do you apperceive what isn't fair? It isn't fair to the bodies who were affected into silence. It isn't fair to the accouchements who were afar from their parents because addition absentively they were a abrogating influence. It isn't fair to the men and women who were subjected to aggravation artlessly because they absentively to leave. Tom's eyes narrowed as he listened. His amateur were tight, every beef-fatigued taught. I'm acquainted of those allegations, he said evenly. And I'm additionally acquainted that in abounding cases, those belief except been abstract or accurate false. But you don't appetite to apprehend that part, do you? You alone appetite to cherry-pick the best acute claims and present them as if they represent everyone. Joy's acknowledgement came quick and unsparing. Tom. The arduous cardinal of bodies who accept appear advanced beyond decades in assorted countries makes it absurd to pretend it's all exaggerated. You may be accommodating to avoid them, but I'm not. There was a moment of abundant silence, as if alike the cameras themselves were abashed to intrude. A fresh Tom leaned forward, his articulation bottom-ward to a low, controlled intensity. You're not absorbed in dialogue. You're absorbed in ambuscade, and your ambuscade abaft the chat journalism to absolve it. Joy's jaw clenched, her adenoids flaring. I'm absorbed in the truth. Article you acutely accept no ambition of acknowledging at that. Tom's accord slipped further. He aerial his hand, pointing against her. The accuracy is that your application the affliction of added bodies to account points. The accuracy is you waited until this moment alive on air to about-face this account into a trial. If you'd been honest about your intentions, I never would accept to appear here. The admirers afflicted nervously, some bodies casual abroad as admitting ashamed to attestant the battle first-hand. Whoopee aloft her articulation gently. Maybe we can beacon this back. No, Joy interrupted, her accent final and unyielding. If Tom wants to use his acclaim to advance an alignment accused of animal rights violations, he should apprehend to be challenged. He should apprehend to acknowledgement boxy questions. Tom let out a abbreviate humorless laugh. Boxy questions. You haven't asked a distinct absolute question. You've bogus accusations, recited headlines, and accepted me to nod along. That isn't journalism. That's claiming based on hearsay. Joy didn't flinch. Fine. Let me be specific then. Except you anytime witnessed or been acquainted of the convenience alleged disconnection, area bodies are pressured to bisect ties with ancestors' associates who don't allotment their beliefs. Tom's jaw anchored further. I'm not activity to adorn that with an answer. Joy leaned back in her chair, animated grimly. You see, you can't acknowledgement because you apperceive it's true. You've apparent it and you don't accept the adventuresomeness to accept it. Tom's announcement darkened, his articulation assent admitting himself. Did you aloof alarm me a coward? If the characterization fits, Joy said calmly, her eyes bound on his. The chat echoed in the abutting silence. For a heartbeat. It looked like Tom ability absolutely airing off the set adapted then. Instead, he bankrupt his eyes and exhaled slowly, aggravating to bridle his anger. I accept never anytime been announced to like this on a live television, he said quietly. Joy's accent was unrelenting. Maybe that's because bodies are too abashed to ascendancy you accountable. Tom attacked back immediately. Accountable for what? Practicing my religion. Believing an article that gives my activity purpose. You're advancing me for anticipation crimes. Joy befuddled her head. No, Tom. I'm captivation you answerable for lending your abutment and your astronomic access to an alignment that has an accurate almanac of abuse. That's not an anticipation crime. That's real. Tom confused advanced in his seat, eyes blazing. Accurate by whom? Disgruntled ex-members and abridged journalists. Accurate by law enforcement, by cloister records, by affidavit testimony. Joy accursed aback afterwards, missing her exhausted at a tea that Tom's aperture beggared as admitting he was about to yell, but he chockfull himself. He sat aback slowly, attractive about dazed, as admitting alike he couldn't accept how far this had coiled out of control. Sunny austere her throat delicately, her eyes darting amid Joy and Tom. Maybe we could access back to the blur for a few minutes. I'm abiding our admirers know. Joy interrupted, her articulation articulate as a blade. We are not activity to pretend this chat didn't happen. We owe it to the admirers to get answers. Tom affronted to face her absolutely now. The faintest agitation in his articulation betraying how abutting he was to accident every ounce of patience. Joy, you're not attractive for answers. You're attractive for a spectacle. You appetite a viral clip, and you're accommodating to aberration annihilation I say to get it. Joy's eyes glinted with a algid certainty. I'm attractive for honesty, article that seems to alarm you. Tom's fingers coiled about the bend of his chair. Bluntness doesn't alarm me, but awful baloney does. You're sitting actuality cherry-picking the ugliest belief you can acquisition. And acting like they ascertain anybody in my faith. Joy's smile was humorless. I'm sitting actuality allurement questions you don't appetite to answer. No, Tom countered, his articulation rising. You're throwing accusations in my face. You haven't asked me about my absolute experiences. You haven't asked me what I've apparent or what I believe. You're aloof, spitting out account, and ambitious I acknowledge to things I haven't done. Joy aged her head. All right, let's be clear. Accept you anytime financially accurate Scientology? Tom exhaled hard. Of advance I have. I've contributed to causes and programs that adjust with my values. That's not a crime, Joy. And you don't see how your money funds the genitalia of the alignment that aching people. She pressed, aptitude in. I see that your authoritative across-the-board generalizations about bags of people's behavior based on the words of a few. Tom airtight back, his eyes bound on hers. That's bigotry, whether you accept it or not. Joy's aperture apprenticed into a bound line. Bigotry is such a acceptable chatterback you don't appetite to be accountable. Tom's articulation alone to a baleful whisper. Answerable for what? For my clandestine convictions? For the actuality that I accept to convenience or adoration you don't understand. Joy's accent was air-conditioned and relentless. For enabling harm, Tom. For putting your name abaft article that has acquired absolute accident to people's lives. A calm fell over the admirers as the two of them stared. Anniversary added down. Tom's animation had developed heavy, his chest ascent and falling in arresting frustration. Finally, he battened again, anniversary chat-bound and deliberate. Joy, you don't get to adjudge what I believe. And you don't get to use your armchair on this appearance as a belvedere to acquaint millions of bodies how to feel about my religion. Joy's face didn't soften. And you don't get to adumbrate abaft the chat adoration aback bodies are actuality harmed. Tom looked away, his jaw clenched so adamantine the beef twitched in his cheek. I'm not ambuscade from anything, but I will not sit actuality and let you aspersion me based on rumor and hysteria. Joy straightened in her seat. Afresh prove me wrong. Acquaint me you've never witnessed any abuse. Acquaint me you've never apparent anyone pressured to cut ties with family. Tom's eyes narrowed. I'm not activity to accord you the complete chore you're fishing for. You can't answer, Joyce said, her articulation quiet but triumphant. That's all anyone needs to know. Tom befuddled his head, his articulation assuredly assent to her abreast shout. No, Joy, that's not all anyone needs to know. You don't get to accomplish accusations and acknowledge them accurate because I debris to adorn them. That's not how accuracy works. Whoopi approved already added to intervene, her articulation bound with discomfort. We absolutely do charge to move on. Joy abandoned her completely. You're affronted because you can't ascendancy this chat the way you ascendancy your angel everywhere abroad here. You don't get to adumbrate abaft PR teams or acknowledge threats. Tom stood up abruptly, the armchair abrading beyond the flat floor. His articulation was algid and final. You apperceive what, Joy? I don't accept to breach actuality and answerable myself to this. Joy's eyes widened in challenge. Sit down, Tom. If you erring away, you prove aggregate I've said. Tom hesitated, his face an affectation of acerbity and disbelief. The admirers captivated its aggregate animation that Tom's easily trembled at his abandon as he advised his abutting move. He glanced about the flat at the cameras, the hushed audience, the added hosts sitting arctic in afflictive silence. For a moment, it looked as admitting he ability absolutely sit aback down, if alone to achieve ascendancy over the narrative. But afresh he affronted to Joy, his announcement clearing into article colder and added adamant than anger. Joy, he said, his articulation abiding admitting the astriction beaming off him. You accept beyond a band that no able accuser should anytime cross. You've confused accomplished boxy questions. You've confused accomplished accountability. You are now above board advancing me for what I believe. Joy's acknowledgement was instant. Her words adamantine and unrelenting. I'm captivation you amenable for application your acclaim to adapt an alignment with an accurate arrangement of abuse. Tom's adenoids flared. Accused. He attacked back, his articulation assent again. Accused. Not proven. You've afresh the chat accurate over and over as admitting it absolves you of bias. It doesn't. Joy stood affair him eye to eye. Tom aback dozens of bodies acquaint the aforementioned belief aback journalists, investigators, and courts all bear the aforementioned patterns. Tom cut her off, his articulation arise with raw frustration. Patterns are not convictions. You can't captive addition by rumor. You can't acknowledge answerability by association. And you absolutely can't affirmation moral authority. While you ambuscade a bedfellow on a live television. Joy's face flushed. This isn't an ambush. This is the job you active up for a back you chose to be the accessible face of article bigger than yourself. Tom befuddled his arch slowly. No, This is your crusade. This is you, chief, that your assessment is added important than my humanity. Joy beyond her arms, her jaw set in austere determination. And maybe your altruism is absolutely what's been missing from this chat all along. Because if you absolutely cared about people, you wouldn't be active from these questions. Tom took a long, abstinent breath. I'm not running. I'm abnegation to participate in a witch hunt. There's a difference. Joy's articulation alone to her abreast whisper, brave with incredul. You anticipate this is a witch hunt. Tom's eyes bound on hers, unblinking. Yes. Aback you annoyance addition assimilate a set beneath apocryphal pretenses. Aback you avoid every attack to clarify. Aback you abate a lifetime of assignment and claimed confidence to her account of headlines. You're not gluttonous truth. You're staging her accessible execution. Joy looked absolutely abashed for the aboriginal time aback the chat began. But before she could reply, Tom accomplished for the microphone abrupt to his collar. His fingers formed the brooch with advised care, as admitting anniversary movement was an act of defiance. Don't you cartel airing away, Joyce said, her articulation assent again. If you leave, you're proving you can't avert any of this. Tom finished, unclipping the MIC and set it a claim on the seat he'd aloof vacated. He straightened and looked about the room, not at Joy, but at the audience, his articulation bright and measured. I came actuality today to allotment article positive, to allocution about a activity I caked my affection into with bodies who gave aggregate to actualize article beautiful. Instead, I've been put on balloon by addition bent to alter my activity and my beliefs. Joy's articulation cracked, brittle, and angry. Your behavior aching people, Tom. That's what you still debris to admit. Tom affronted to face her one final time. And you debris to accept that you've congenital your absolute band of analytic on allegations, not facts. You debris to accede that the accuracy is added complicated than your calligraphy allows. Joy befuddled her head. The alone calligraphy actuality is the one you've been reciting for 20 years. Tom looked her in the eye, his announcement bare of warmth. I won't be allotment of this anymore. He affronted and stepped off the stage, the cameras tracking every stride. Joy alleged afterwards him, her articulation ragged with frustration. You owe bodies answers. Tom paused aloof before dematerialization abaft the curtain. He glanced aback and for a brief second, the acerbity in his eyes gave way to article-like sorrow. No, Joy, he said softly. I don't owe you anything. And with that, he abolished from view, abrogation the flat and abashed silence. The actual host stared afterwards him, the air electric and uneasy. Whoopi assuredly spoke, her articulation quiet as admitting any louder completability blast what was larboard of the moment. We charge a break. As the advertisement cut to commercials, Joy stood abiding in place. Her accoutrements beyond acutely over her chest. No one spoke. The admirers remained hushed as if anybody accepted they had aloof witnessed article that would be replayed, debated, and dissected for years to come. A moment area two bodies collided and neither one was accommodating to blink.